God's timing is perfect, not predictable. This is one of the deepest truths hidden within the ways of the Most High, yet it is one of the most difficult for the human heart to accept. We are born into a world ruled by the clock, trained to measure progress by time, conditioned to expect immediate results. But the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob does not move by the ticking of seconds or the turning of the calendar. He dwells outside of time, above it and beyond it. His timing is not human, it is holy. Look at Abraham, the father of faith. He was given a promise, not by man, but by God himself. I will make you a great nation. Your descendants will be as numerous as the stars. And Abraham believed. But belief was followed not by immediate fulfillment, but by waiting. Year upon year, decade upon decade, the promise did not come quickly. It did not come conveniently. It did not come in the strength of youth, but in the weakness of old age. And yet, the delay was not a failure of the promise, but a stage in its fulfillment. Abraham was called not just to believe in the beginning, but to believe through the waiting. There's a mystery here. If God could create the universe in 6 days, could he not bring a child to Sarah's womb in 1 moment? Could he not speak and instantly fulfill every promise? He could, but he chooses not to. Why? Because his timing is not transactional, it is transformational. In the waiting, Abraham became something he was not at the beginning, a man whose faith had been tested and purified like gold, a 10. Had the promise come quickly, there would have been no journey. No journey, no testing. No testing, no transformation. This is the pattern of heaven. The promise is given, the vision is cast, the word is spoken, and then comes the delay, not because God has forgotten, but because he is doing something greater than we can see. He is not only working through the promise, he is working on the one who received it. He is molding the heart, training the spirit, enlarging the soul. The delay is not the enemy of the promise. It is the womb that carries it until its appointed time. Consider Moses, called to deliver Israel. He moved too soon, and in his own strength killed the Egyptian. What followed? 40 years in the wilderness. 40 years of silence, of obscurity, of delay. Yet, that delay was the very place God used to shape a deliverer. By the time Moses stood before Pharaoh, he was not the same man who had once fled into the desert. He had been broken, humbled, refined, prepared not in haste, but in the furnace of divine timing. Or David, anointed by the prophet while still a youth, chosen by God to be king, yet pursued by Saul, driven into caves, living in exile, running for his life. The crown was his by divine decree, but it did not rest on his head for many years. Why? Because the throne was not just a position, it was a calling that required a character shaped by trials and forged by waiting. Had he seized the kingdom by force, he would have become Saul. But in the delay, he became David. God is not slow as we understand slowness. His ways are higher and his timing is eternal. What seems like delay to us is perfect rhythm to him. He knows the moment when the seed must be planted, when it must remain hidden in the soil, and when it must break through the ground. To rush the process is to ruin the harvest. In our impatience, we cry out, Lord, why haven't you answered? Why the silence? Why the delay? But the true question is not, why is God taking so long? The real question is, what is God doing in this waiting? Because he is always doing something, always orchestrating, aligning, preparing. And if he has not moved, it is not because he has forgotten. It is because the fullness of time has not yet come. The promise is never in doubt, but the path is not meant to be predictable. The fulfillment will come, not in our time, but in his time. And his time is perfect. Delays are a tool of divine preparation. They are not the interruptions of God's plan, but are woven into the very fabric of it. What we see as obstacles, setbacks, or detours, heaven sees as sacred processes, necessary and purposed. In the economy of the Spirit, time is not wasted, it is invested. And every moment of waiting is filled with intention. The God who called you is also the God who is preparing you, and he often does it in the hidden, silent, prolonged places we call delay. Look at Joseph. He received a dream from God, a glimpse of destiny, a revelation of his future. The dream was clear, powerful, prophetic, but what followed was not the throne, it was betrayal. He was sold into slavery by his own brothers, taken to a foreign land, and made a servant in the house of Potiphar. Still, the favor of God rested on him. Yet just as he rose in that house, he was falsely accused and thrown into prison. Years passed. Forgotten by men, bound in chains, surrounded by shadows. The dream must have felt like a lie. But the prison was not the end. It was the preparation. Joseph entered Egypt as a dreamer, but he would not step into his destiny until he had become a man of wisdom, integrity, and endurance. He would not sit at Pharaoh's right hand until he had been tested in the fire of patience and proven in the school of adversity. The delay was not a denial of the dream, it was the preparation for the fulfillment. Had he been released too soon, he would have lacked the strength to carry the weight of what God was about to give him. Every day in that dungeon was forming in him the character required for the palace. This is how heaven works. The promise is never handed cheaply, the anointing comes freely, but the authority must be forged. Many are called, but few are prepared, and the preparation is costly. It does not happen in the spotlight, but in the shadows. It does not occur on the platform, but in the place of waiting. The delay becomes the crucible, the holy ground where God shapes his vassals for glory. Think of David. He was anointed by the prophet Samuel to be king, and yet he spent years running from Saul, living in caves, surrounded by the rejected and broken. He was already called, already chosen, already anointed, but he was not yet ready. God was forming in him the heart of a shepherd. Heaven's silence is not God's absence. It is one of the greatest deceptions of the enemy to equate the quietness of God with the abandonment of God. But silence is not the void, it is the veil. It is the place where faith is tested, where the heart is revealed, where trust is forged not by what we hear, but by who we know. The God of Mount Sinai, who thundered and shook the earth, is also the God of Horeb, who whispered in the still, small voice. He is not always found in the fire, the wind, or the earthquake. Sometimes he is found in the silence. There are seasons when the heavens appear closed, when you pray but no answer comes, when you seek but find nothing, when you knock and the door remains shut. These are the seasons that can shake a soul to its core. The mind begins to question, the heart begins to waver. Did I miss it? Did God change his mind? Has he left me? But the silence of heaven is not the absence of God's presence. It is the concealment of his work. It is the mystery of divine timing, the hidden hand that still moves, even when it makes no sound. Consider the story of Lazarus. When the sisters sent word to Yeshua, they said, "Lord, the one you love is sick." They did not question his love. They did not doubt his power. They believed that the moment he heard, he would come. But he didn't. He stayed where he was. He delayed. And in the delay, Lazarus died. Imagine the silence that followed. No messenger, no miracle, just mourning. They must have thought, he loved us. Why didn't he come? But the silence was not a sign of neglect. It was the setting for a greater glory. When the word finally came, it didn't come to heal a sickness. It came to raise the dead. What they perceived as silence was the orchestration of resurrection. In the same way, the wilderness is filled with silence. Israel came out of Egypt with signs and wonders, but the desert brought the hush of testing. There was no pillar of fire every night, no daily thunder from the mountain. There were long stretches where God did not speak, yet it was in that silence that they were shaped. The murmuring of Egypt had to be silenced, the identity of slavery had to be broken, and God allowed the silence to expose what was still bound within them. Job sat in silence for 7 days with his friends, mourning his loss, his body broken, his heart shattered. He cried out into the void, but heaven gave no answer. And yet, in the end, God spoke, not because Job earned a response, but because the silence had served its purpose. It revealed Job's heart. It purified his questions. It stripped him of every illusion. And when God spoke, he didn't explain the silence. He revealed his greatness. The silence was the threshold to the unveiling of the Almighty. Faith is not built on answers, but on presence. And God's presence is not confined to moments of divine speech. He was with Joseph in the prison, with Moses in the wilderness, with Daniel in the lion's den, with John on the island of Patmos. None of these places were marked by noise. They were marked by the stillness that precedes revelation, the silence that guards the sacred. When God is silent, it does not mean he is not speaking. It means he is speaking in a different language, the language of trust. He is drawing us deeper, past the surface, beyond the noise, into a place where we learn to recognize his presence without proof, to believe without confirmation, to trust without explanation. That is the essence of faith, the evidence of things not seen, the substance of things hoped for. Even Messiah himself knew the silence. In Gethsemane, he cried out to the Father. On the cross, he shouted, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And yet the Father had not forsaken him. He was silent, but he was present, watching, waiting, working. And on the third day, the silence broke, and the stone was rolled away. And this is the mystery. When heaven is silent, God is not gone. He is closer than breath, nearer than your next heartbeat, watching over his word, waiting for the fullness of time. The silence becomes the sanctuary where we learn not to walk by sight, not to live by feeling, but to move in faith, to rest in his sovereignty, to stand on his word, even when the heavens are still. Faith must persevere through the delay. It is not enough to believe in the beginning. True faith endures. It stands when nothing is moving. It holds when everything is silent. It clings when the wind is against it, when the night is long, when every visible sign says the promise will never come. The faith that brings breakthrough is not the faith that flashes like lightning and disappears. It is the faith that burns like a hidden flame, unyielding in the dark. There is purpose in the pause. In the kingdom of God, nothing is wasted, and that includes the spaces between the promise and the fulfillment. The pauses of heaven are not empty. They are filled with purpose, with precision, with process. What looks like delay is often divine orchestration. What feels like stagnation is sacred development. The pause is not passive. It is active in ways unseen. It is the interval where heaven shapes what cannot be shaped in the rush. When a seed is planted in the soil, there is a pause before the sprout breaks the surface. Days, even weeks may pass where nothing is visible, but within the darkness of the soil there is movement, there is life. The seed is being undone, its shell broken, its DNA awakened. What was hidden begins to take root, and only after the rooting does the rising come. So it is with the promises of God. The pause is not the death of the seed, but the moment of its transformation. It is where destiny takes root in the secret place. The pause teaches what the breakthrough cannot. It trains the heart to trust, the soul to listen, the spirit to discern. It is in the pause that we learn the voice of the shepherd, not in the roar of answered prayer, but in the stillness of waiting. It is in the pause that self is silenced and surrender becomes more than a word. It becomes the posture of life. The pause strips away the noise. It reveals what truly governs us: fear or faith, comfort or calling, emotion or obedience. Yeshua himself lived in the pause. Before the miracle at Cana, there was 30 years of silence, 30 years of preparation for 3 years of ministry. The Son of God was content to wait until the fullness of time had come. He did not rush the calling, he submitted to the process. In the carpenter's shop, in the quiet of Nazareth, heaven was working, preparing, forming the vessel for the glory to come. The pause was not a waste. It was the hidden path of obedience. Consider David once more, anointed in his youth, yet paused before he reigned. That pause was not accidental. It was purposeful. He was learning to lead not from a throne, but from a cave. Not through command, but through trust. Saul still sat on the throne, but David was being shaped to carry the crown in a way Saul never could. Had David taken the throne without the pause, he would have ruled in haste, in pride, in presumption. But the pause humbled him, taught him to wait on God's timing, not his own. The pause produced the Psalms, the cries of a heart after God. The children of Israel were promised a land flowing with milk and honey, yet they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. To the natural eye, it looked like a detour, a delay, but to the eyes of the Spirit, it was a crucible. Egypt had left their bodies, but it had not left their hearts. In the pause, the idols were exposed, the complaints were surfaced, the trust was tested. A generation passed away, and a new one was raised, one that had learned to depend on manna, to follow the cloud, to obey without knowing the outcome. Paul, too, lived through pauses. After encountering the risen Messiah on the road to Damascus, he did not begin his ministry immediately. He was taken into obscurity, into Arabia, where God rewrote his understanding, stripped away his pride, and instilled the revelation of grace. The great apostle was formed not on the public stage, but in the silence of preparation. And when he emerged, his words would shake nations, plant churches, and unveil mysteries hidden for ages. Even creation itself bears the mark of the pause. The Sabbath was ordained not after exhaustion, but after completion. God paused not because he needed rest, but to set a rhythm, a holy interruption in the flow of time, a space to reflect, to remember, to realign. The pause is sacred. It is where strength is renewed, vision is clarified, and the soul is recalibrated to heaven's tempo. In our rush to reach the promise, we can miss the purpose of the process. But the pause is where character is refined, where